and this will be the biggest challenge of the day for Madam Jeep member. So how did we get here? In August 2016, we purchased Miss Kitty with the idea of building her into a wheeler that we could use anywhere in the country. Shortly after her purchase, we had the fine folks at WFO Concepts in Auburn, California put on a 3.5-inch AEV lift. We started with 35-inch tires and quickly went to 37s. We wanted to keep the stealth look and reduce costs, so we kept the stock wheels, fenders, and bumpers. Over the next 4 years and approximately 40,000 miles, we proceeded to wheel Miss Kitty. We wheeled her pretty hard for the stock condition of most components. We, all me, almost dumped her into a canyon in Arizona and dropped her and the trailer she was riding on off the back of the motorhome at about 60 miles per hour, using up 2 of Miss Kitty's 9 lives, thus the name Miss Kitty. With the 4 years of use and abuse, the fenders and bumpers were looking a bit haggard, and the wearable parts like bushings and suspension parts were needing a refresh. It was nearing decision time. I had a vision of what I wanted to see. At the same time, the beer had helped keep us near what is arguably the premier rock crawling venue in the West. Having friends push me to up my wheeling game combined to having us wheeling Miss Kitty harder than I had ever imagined. I needed to get Madam Jeep member a ride in an advanced rig so that she could experience the difference. We had met Tony and Debbie Pellegrino, owners of GenRight Off Road, at a previous FMCA 4-wheelers event. Tony was kind enough to take Madam Jeep member and me over the Double Sammy Trail in Hurricane, Utah during the Trail Hero event in October of 2020. A couple of my friends had extensive Jeep building work done by Jeremy Thompson of Eminence Off Road in Washington, Utah. Leland's LJ and Danny's JKU builds came out nicely. Jeremy's attention to detail and craftsmanship were undeniable. After a couple months of negotiations, we settled on having Jeremy take Miss Kitty to the next level. Parts ordering started in January of 2021 for an anticipated build start in May of 2021. There are many ways to do Jeep builds. They can be done piecemeal, over time, or they can be done once in a big way. Many times it's cheaper in the long run to just go big from the beginning. The theory is that a build will ultimately reach a certain level, and it's cheaper to spend the money once instead of multiple times on the same component as one upgrades multiple times over time. With that as the ideology, we went almost all the way in. The upgrades would be extensive. The only portions of Miss Kitty that would remain in stock form when completed would be the body, the motor, and the transmission. Every other aspect of the vehicle would be touched, modified, or replaced. It was to be a full frame-off rework. Jeremy started by taking the body off of the frame and removing all of the old fenders and bumpers and axles. Notice the number and heft of the cross members on the frame when the body was removed. We'll check back on that a bit later. Just 12 days later, the frame has been stripped of all but one of its original cross members, and the smooth belly skid plate has been cut out. On June 8th, this was the scene. The JL Width Ultimate 60 rear axle had been fitted with the truss needed for the upper control arms. Jeremy was in the process of fixing the location where the upper control arms would attach to the frame. By June 15th, Jeremy had temporarily reunited the body and frame. He had installed the new 2-speed Atlas transfer case and was in the process of locating one of the new, more hefty cross members. And he had installed the new PSC big bore steering box. This is the original transfer case cross member. If you look closely, you can see where it is deformed from hitting the ground with the bottom of the car. The telltale signs are the deformed stamped metal components either side of center, closest to the side facing toward the camera. 2 days after that, the body is back off the frame, and Jeremy has welded the 1/4-inch thick cross member. And work was coming along nicely on the front shock towers and cross member mounting locations for the front 3-link control arm setup. The King brand 2-inch air bump stops were fitted next to the shock towers in the front. The air bumps provide extra suspension cushioning as the suspension approaches full compression. There are the 40-inch Cooper STT Pro Tires on KMC beadlock wheels. The 25-gallon GenRight fuel tank allowed the relocation of the tank to the rear of the Jeep and allowed us to add 3 gallons of fuel capacity. With that relocation kit, GenRight provides a new access cover that cuts into the back floor of the body. This allows for the fuel tank access from the top in case of a fuel pump issue after the install. With the fuel tank moved to the back, this enabled Jeremy to construct a full double triangulated 4-link suspension for the rear. This allowed for the elimination of the rear track bar. The control arms are aluminum from Summit Machine. The original rear Swaybar was in the wrong location for the suspension rework. A new RockJock Swaybar was chosen and works in total conjunction with the GenRight fuel tank. One of the toughest choices of this build was what to do with the rear shocks. To do this build right, the shocks needed to be moved as far out toward the ends of the axles as possible. This provides for greater stability. Additionally, generally speaking, longer shock travel provides additional articulation, which translates to traction in uneven terrain. These two situations combine to provide a challenge for an owner who does not want to mess up the interior of the car by cutting it up. Ultimately, to get the ride and capabilities that I was looking for, it was necessary to move the shocks and push the tops up into what was the interior of the vehicle. 14-inch 2.5 King coilover shocks with internal bump stops were chosen for the rear suspension. Because Jeep had the audacity to originally put the frame where the shocks should go, the frame had to be completely rerouted around the shocks. It had to be dissected, the shock tower added, and then reassembled. An additional, very stout 1/4-inch plate crossmember was installed between the two rear shock towers. On June 30th, we went over to Jeremy's to check out the progress. Jeremy and Jagger surprised us with a very nicely and appropriately decorated birthday cake. Work was continuing nicely on Miss Kitty. The 3-link front setup was taking shape, and the Ultimate 60 front axle was almost ready to go in. The Ultimate 60 axles were chosen because of their price point, durability, and almost universal parts availability. Because of the standard upright axle design, some of the up-treble capability was compromised. Regardless of the axle chosen, clearances at full stuff are always quite tight around the front differential. Because the new 3-link front suspension system is quite different than the factory 4-link, clearance issues occurred with the driver's side exhaust piping. Jeremy had to get creative, and the result was a complete 180-degree reversal of the piping with a crossover underneath the oil pan instead of the original under the transfer case cross. The exhaust was then routed down the passenger side and all the way to the back. Ultimately, the exhaust was wrapped in heat shielding the entire length. The new Mishimoto Radiator was ready to go in, and GenRight aluminum bumpers were used front and rear. While on the subject of GenRight, I want to emphasize that the double triangulated rear suspension and the outboarded shocks for the rear axle would not be possible on Miss Kitty without a GenRight gas tank. And for those of you who may want to know how the cut into the body for the rear shocks ended up, here is the finished product. Jeremy built aluminum enclosures to isolate the interior and exterior of the vehicle. The enclosures are bolted to the body, and then the entire surface has been covered in carpet-like material that closely matches the existing interior. The result is a very near stock appearance that narrows the interior about 5 to 6 inches between the two shock towers. With the difficult radius and angles that had to be put into these covers, Jeremy's workmanship really shows in the fact that the whole thing looks almost factory. Madam Jeep member and I are very pleased with the way this part of the build turned out. We wanted to retain as close to a factory look on the fenders as we could. We also wanted to stay with plastic fenders because they provide more give when making contact with an obstacle. Fenders from MCE seemed to be the best fit for Miss Kitty. On July 15th, approximately 10 weeks after being started, Miss Kitty was complete enough to be put on the road and trail. On the 16th, we ran Milt's Mile and Double Sammy as a shakedown. Here's Miss Kitty doing the middle of the three monkeys. And here's a perspective that you don't get every day, courtesy of a well-placed crack on hard right turn. Here's what it looked like from the top. Here's some impressive flex on hard left turn with a small wave to the crowd at the end. Less than a week later, we were in Northern California ready to take on the Rubicon Trail during the Jeepers Jamboree. As with any build, there's a learning curve and there are growing pains. One cannot touch a vehicle this significantly and not have some issues. In our case, 4 weeks of almost constant trail use on the Rubicon uncovered some of these. While on a day trip between Spyder Lake and Rubicon Springs, one of the hydraulic lines between the power steering pump and the hydraulic ram came apart. Fortunately, we were within short walking distance of Buck Island Lake. One of the mechanics there had a replacement line, and we were back up and running in about an hour. All fluids were cleaned up, and we were on our way. Several weeks later, at the end of our third trip, we were on our way out of the trail when we had a fairly serious mishap in the bowl. Miss Kitty stepped off a 4.5-foot tall wall with a trailer attached. I had misjudged the drop. Because of the dynamics of the new control arms and my lack of total familiarity, the arms were seriously out of adjustment. The result was that the lower driver's side front control arm separated from the hind joint. The internal threads in the control arm were damaged. A quick call to Trevor at WFO Concepts in Auburn got a new control arm made and en route. About 5 hours later, we were on our way off the trail with the new control arm installed. Upon our return to Hurricane, Jeremy was able to reuse the original aluminum control arm and bring all of the adjustments that I had allowed to get loose back within normal limits. Since then, I have been much more observant about all the nuts and bolts under Miss Kitty so that we don't have a repeat of the control arm caper. Since July 15th, we have jeeped about 3 weeks on the Rubicon, 2 weeks at Moab, 2 weeks plus several days at Sand Hollow, and 3 days at Johnson Valley. I can say that Jeremy has built a very capable rig that is vastly different and more capable than any vehicle that I have ever owned. Within reason, it has taken everything that I have thrown at it so far. So, the $100,000 question. Would we do this build again? Under ideal conditions, no. I would build a completely separate rig that was not our daily driver. While Miss Kitty has excellent road manners and is quite capable of cruising all day at highway speeds, it is still a Jeep on 40-inch tall tires with a stock motor and transmission. Additionally, it's quite inconvenient to have our only vehicle in the shop because I have been continuously pushing it to its limits. However, if you only have the budget or lifestyle constraints that allows you to have just one vehicle, it's pretty doggone cool to be wheeling in the boulders and rocks at some of the preeminent off-roading venues in this country in the morning, and then hauling the mail on the highway to get to your next destination in the afternoon, all the while riding in air-conditioned or heated comfort. So for us, Miss Kitty is about as good as it gets for now. Thanks to Leland Blankenship, Trevor Huskins, John Arns, Tony Pellegrino, Jeff Perkins, Stephen Birch, Bill Christensen, and Danny Shelton for their inspiration and contributions to this build. And a very special thanks to Jeremy Thompson of Eminence Off Road in Washington, Utah for his ability and vision to be able to make Miss Kitty what she has become and for building her to be tough enough to take what I am now dishing out. So this pretty much wraps up the build on Miss Kitty for now. And from Pismo Beach, Madam Jeep members, and Miss Kitty's favorite spot, stay tuned for what happens next. If you have liked this video or want to see more of our adventures, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell so that you can be notified of future content. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy trails.